What then happened was Jeff Escobar, and this is where we left off at the last council meeting, and I mentioned Jeff Escobar as a member of the committee and a member of RIRA came to me and explained that it's standard operating procedure these days in development projects for the community to use something called a community benefit agreement, where there's a coalition of community organizations that ultimately negotiates with the developer and signs a legal agreement as to what is going to be provided from the developer to the community. And he cited numerous examples. So we had a meeting, I believe it was June 8th, of the subcommittee, and Jeff went through it in excruciating detail, providing many examples. It first started in California with the Staples Center, of good examples of community benefit agreements in New York City, bad examples of community benefit agreements, and the standard being if a community signs a community benefit agreement with the developer and then the developer doesn't come through with what they've promised to the community, how defensible is that agreement that goes into court? And what you have to do to create a coalition that makes the agreement defensible. So the developer can't say, well, you only had half the community, or you only had a small voice of the community. So Jeff's main point in terms of moving forward was that we needed to create a separate 501(c) that would become a new community coalition. RIRA would be a member, the seniors would be a member, the Disabled Association, the Historical Society. And Jeff's point at that meeting was to get really as many different community organizations represented in this new community coalition. So at that point in time, we were going to actually take a vote from RIRA for that to happen, and then the democracy thing came forward. But we also realized, and then Jonathan became available as a possible person to kind of lead this new community coalition. So where we are right now is Jonathan has been both pulling together ideas, pulling together the list of all of the different community organizations to begin to have a meeting very soon that would be this new community coalition, tentatively named, Silicon Island Development Corporation. Because Jonathan came up with that name and then Jessica laughed and picked up on it in the press conference. In the interim, a meeting took place between Jonathan, me, and the Vice President of Development from Stanford, Matt from Sherryburg in Africa. All things considered, I would prefer to be in Africa, but it was a very nice meeting with a gentleman from Stanford, and we presented to him. He asked tons of questions about the island. We talked about lots of different things. Jonathan does have a focus on the possibility of energy, and I mean, obviously in the new campus, they're going to have to bring in new sources of energy, and fuel cells are not obvious. And would there be some way, with whatever they have to do to develop energy down there, to then make that energy also available on the island to address some of the energy issues we have with sun metering, et cetera. And this is my opinion, that that's sort of where Jonathan's mind is. He's thinking in terms of long-term infrastructure benefits that we might be able to get out of this. There happens to be another meeting tomorrow morning between Matt, me, Jonathan, and again the same Vice President of Development from Stanford. Stanford really wants to win this thing. Now, as you may have heard, Cornell is now hired a PR firm, hired an architectural firm. Cornell wants to win it too, but they know my name, they have to know Jonathan's name, they have to know Matt's name. We haven't heard from them. We've heard from Stanford now twice. So that's where it's at. We're waiting for Jonathan to actually call this meeting where he invites all of the community organizations. Jeffrey then to put together the legal paperwork for there to be this separate organization. And the bids are due to the universities at the end of October. But the timing, so it's understandable, and this comes from Jeffrey's experience, we thought we had to be all in place before the bids would be submitted. But in truth, it's like the city will pick the winner of the bid, and then they go on this long negotiation process. I mean, we saw a little bit of it with the Main Street retail. This long negotiation process in terms of what is actually, what's the city going to contribute, what are the buildings going to look like. And it's at that point that then the new community coalition
one question embedded in a statement. As I understand it, CDAs are fairly common in a situation like this. So I wish to ensure that we are keeping in mind that as we pursue a CDA, we have, and it's really a relatively small part of the overall effort, obviously. But we don't want to pursue a CDA in a way that could be onerous to those that we're really interested in who want to come to this place. I mean, even though it's a small part, we just don't want to be onerous to them. You know what I mean? We want to temper this in a way and present it in a way that we don't turn them off. We want to turn them on. Right? It will benefit us, but we have to show them how it benefits them as well.
I can say I think the subcommittee was very sensitive to that when we met both times, and Jonathan certainly is sort of the, whatever you call him, the informal sort of point person on this, is very sensitive to that, while at the same time sensitive for asking for some potentially big things, like fuel cells that provide energy. So, I mean, point well noted that there's balance there.
Denise, do I understand correctly that the CDA really won't get started until one of these 18 agencies is actually chosen and then chooses Roosevelt Island as their site of choice?
Right. So the bids are due the end of October. The city's supposed to announce at the end of December who it will be. At that point, then our new community coalition would step in as a stakeholder in the negotiation. So it would be really 2012 in terms of when the negotiating activity is going on. Which without Jeffrey's understanding of it, like we all thought we had to move a little bit more quickly.
John, did you have? John Paul?
No.
Nothing? Anyone?
Yeah, I have a question. Well, will the environmental review be done for the project?
Yeah, there's extensive environmental requirements in the RFP.
Right, the city environmental review I'm focusing on. The city has a separate environmental review process. And I'd like to know, I think it would be good to know whether or not this project falls under the auspices of the environmental review process for the city of New York.
I can't say that I specifically read that it does, but having read the parts of the RFP that I have read, I can't imagine that it doesn't. There's extensive information in there related to asbestos, related to environmental issues that are already there. I didn't read the whole thing, but I can't say for sure this is my opinion. I can't imagine.
Sure. I think that's something that we might want to try to find out because the city has certain criteria for real estate projects. A big pardon?
The ULURP process?
The ULURP.
Yes, I was
the-
told the guy that's legal that they don't do ULURP.
Oh, this
Yeah.
process is? Oh, good.
I think it's.
So they
I
just
think
want to
it's.
go through the environmental review process.
I think it's fair to say, though, that unless and until there's an actual plan on paper, on schematics, with numbers and estimates of how room in the space will be allocated, we really can't do an environmental statement because we don't know what's going to be built. Once there is a plan in place, then the environmental implications of that plan will certainly be discussed, if not by the Economic Development Corporation, who's onshore this in the city, then by other agencies.
Yeah, I had a question and a comment in that being that I think regardless of which universities here, there would be significant, I'm guessing, impact to our tram-based general transportation, given there's only two roads here, Main Street. So is there some sort of impact analysis or recommendations that each of these universities are providing, or we're leading discussions on that topic?
That's actually a question we brought up at our subcommittee, and the truth is, I don't know the answer to that. I really don't. I know that they brought up to us immediately transportation on and off the island, but in terms of intra-island transportation, Frank brought up construction, etc.
I know
I don't know.
But that's a chapter of the environmental review, of the city environmental review, specifically traffic and parking. Transit and pedestrian is another chapter of the environmental review report. I mean, I think for a project like this is going to be at least 500-600 pages, but that's part of the city review process.
As a part of the dedication process to review what each of the,
Remember, it's the city property.
Right, it is city property. Primary, I mean, there's a ribbon around the outside that's not, and it's,
Actually, it is around, it's the ribbon that's still city property, and everything outside the ribbon is.
Now, would you explain, they're on state land. That's city land, we are on the state. Expand on that. Does that mean we get no income from this?
Denise, can I answer this
Yeah.
question? Is that the lease here, the lease for Roosevelt Island covers everything except for the hospital footprint, and I think it's 5 or 10 feet, or whatever, some small number of feet around it. So unlike us here, where we're on lease and, there's all the complicated arrangements, that's just straight city land. Okay, not touched by the lease.
So they don't
You raised a very
contribute
interesting
to our
point.
budget in any
They
way.
will not have a New York State ground lease, the way our residential buildings do. However, the purpose of this community benefit agreement is to ensure that when $1 billion project comes to Roosevelt Island, that there will be benefits accruing to this community. So we may be doing a good deal of that negotiating ourselves, exclusive from the state.
which actually makes me just think of a point that just was interesting, I thought you might well find interesting. When Jonathan and I met with Phil Tobin from Stanford, he of course was a little bit confused, somewhat confused about the city-state issue. But we ended up in a bit of a discussion about how this project actually could help the city-state communication and ultimately be a political benefit to us. Pardon? Well, it could make it worse, but if you have $1 billion project that the city is contributing $100 million to, and you've got an institution like Stanford or Cornell, they're going to, at least the people that have power are going to listen, so that they might be able to. And we talked about the fact that they can help us and possibly grease the skids for dialogues that we need. I mean, at this point, like I said, Stanford is extraordinarily interested in Maine, is extraordinarily interested in Roosevelt Island.